in that position.
Yeah, well, Shakespeare wrote the words well. So
I want to ask you, for some reason, I'm particularly interested in the tennis ball scene. So, I mean, it's been played, and I've seen it played so many different ways. Is he, in your view, reacting to that slight, or is he, again, manipulating or consciously manipulating his advisors by playing that part?
I think he's genuinely reacting. I don't think he expects the Dauphin to drop the emissary from the Dauphin to drop those tennis balls, and I think it's so shocking. It's funny.
Yeah.
And it's exactly, I mean, what I would think every night was, it's so Hal.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
This kind of that the Dauphin is doing exactly what I might have done 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And this kind of cavalier FU to the court, which is, you know, which actually was why Hal historically Hal was removed from court, because he got in a fist fight with one of his father's closest advisors, the Lord Chief Justice, and assaulted him during a kind of parliamentary kind of session, and so I think Hal looks at that. Henry looks at that and sees. He almost appreciates it on a weird level,
yeah.
And then knows that it can't stop there.
Right.
So that's why he's and then also he also recognizes that it's a big gift that's been given him.
Yeah.
The Dauphin comes up with this cavalier gesture. Henry's in this wonderful position to go, well, if that's how you want to play it, we'll play it right back. So.
Well, he also is like, I'm better at this than you are.
Yeah, and he is.
Yeah.
You know, he says, I mean, he's got this incredible line. If I can, I have a hard time recalling some of these lines, but tennis balls drop, and he says, "We're glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present in your pains we thank you for." Then he returns a joke with a joke. The Dauphin drops these tennis balls, that's the joke, and he returns the joke. When we've matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set that will strike his father's crown into the hazard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's basically saying, you want to play tennis? I'll play tennis. I'm going to play tennis all over your kingdom,
Yeah.
and every court in your kingdom, and I'm going to win.
And also, as it plays out later, and lots of people will suffer because of what you.
Yeah.
That starts even there.
Yeah, and I think the more that Hal can attack that with confidence, the further he has to fall when he realizes what that decision has done to the people around him. Yeah.
At his park talk, Richard Hay let out or said that you were an active participant in the design conferences for Henry V. Why did you want to do that?
Two reasons. One that's vain, one that's earnest. The vain reason is because other actors that I like a lot have gotten to do that, and I didn't want to be left out of that. So, you know, it was the simple fact that I remember when we were doing Philanderer, and Derek Wheaton was part of the design meetings for that. And I was like, so when you've been here a while, you get to be in design meetings, you know. So there was that, and then the second reason, which is more serious, is that I wanted to know Joe's thoughts about the show from the get-go. I didn't want to start the first rehearsal and be surprised about things and then go, oh, that's not what I was thinking about it, you know. And so I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page, and more actually, honestly, to be frank, that I was on his page as much as possible, so that we started those design meetings 8 months before we started rehearsals, and it allowed me to get a real sense of how he thinks. What's interesting is our original design concept for the show was nothing that was seen on stage. The original design concept, actually, for Henry, and directorial concept for the show was that it was going to be set in a VA hospital, and that yeah, I know, and that Henry was a recent veteran from one of the modern wars, and enters this kind of fever dream that becomes Henry V. That's evoked in our early design discussions. Were evoked. You know, he's sort of sitting in this wheelchair in a somewhat comatose state, watching on TV Olivier's Henry V, and then it becomes sort of this production of the world around him. And then Joe called in December, I would say 4 months before we started rehearsals, and he said, so I've scrapped it all. We're going to start from square one again. I don't want to do all of that because it's not the play. And I've been thinking about it really heavily for the last month, and I want to do the play. So we're not going to do the VA hospital thing. We're going to keep it very austere. That's what we're going to do. And yeah.
Well, it's a production I think that most everyone that's seen it is going to remember for a long time.
That's good. I loved it. I miss it. I miss it already.
You know, there's one of the things that always interests me in terms of how actors look at it. There's an inherent, I think, dynamic tension between the demands of playing a character, portraying a role, and being true to that character, and maintaining a certain loyalty, if you will, to the narrative or the story. How do you think about that? I mean, I don't mean they're in conflict, just that it would seem that it's difficult to focus on both things at once.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that and resolve it in your work?
How do I think about narrative?
Well, more the relationship, character to narrative.
Well, I think that goes back, I think, maybe to the structure thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking about why and how you get from A to B. And, I mean, that's really the way in which I think about it. If character's getting in the way of that, then something's wrong with the character that I'm building. You know? I mean, you know, if I decided to make Henry injured, for example, and have a limp or something, I mean, this would be a terrible choice, but let's say I decided to do something like that, then by the time we get to the wooing scene and he says, I could, you know, if I could win at leapfrog or by vaulting into my saddle with my armor on my back, I should quickly leap into a wife. Well, if he's incapable of, if I have this really great idea of Henry being incapable of movement, and yet he gets to that line at the end, then, you know, we're not doing something right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's like an obvious kind of lame example, but you get the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let our audience ask you some questions as well. Before I do, when we first spoke, you told me you were familiar with James Lipton's program, Inside the Actor Studio, which inspired this series. So I didn't think I'd need to warn you that we'd be concluding the conversation with the Pivo questionnaire from
Okay.
So, John, please tell us, what is your favorite word?
Oh, my favorite word. If I were doing this accurately, I'd have all of these right off the tip of my tongue. My favorite word is friends. It's my favorite word.
As long as it's not your favorite TV show.
No, you can't hiss that. I was saying I was out with my very good friend Dan Parker, who's an actor in the company. Dan and I were out one day, and I was like, probably just because my mother had been in town and then left, I said, I just like friends so much more than family right now. And, I said, why do friends make so much more sense to me than family does? And it's, but you're like, why I'm in theater? I mean, it's like why I go to work every day. My favorite line in Henry, the day my friends and all things stay for me, that ultimately what gets him to go back to war is his friends. And I actually, like, it's something that I've been feeling strongly since middle school, that the whole reason why I do this is friends.
What is your least favorite word?
My least favorite word. No. I hate it. Hate it.
What turns you on?
Spontaneity.
Mm-hmm. What turns you off?
Rigidness.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite curse word?
This is an older crowd. I don't know if I can say my curse word. I'm sorry.
They can handle it.
Really?
Yes.
It's really bad.
Go.
It's really bad. I can't say it at the house because my mother. Yeah, thank you.
No, say it.
It's in 12th night. Does anybody have an idea where I'm going with this? It's in 12th night. Her C's, her U's, her N's, and her T's.
Okay.
It is actually by far my favorite curse word because it blows them all out of the water. It's like the atom bomb of curse words, you know, and it's just like. But I also I fell in love with that curse word when my sister got married to a Brit, and she lives in London. She married this guy Rupert Edward William Clare Hallowell, and Rupert, we were out at a pub. This would have been in 2005 or something. We were at this pub in London, and this guy sort of cut us off at the pub to get his drinks before we got our drinks, and it was a really asshole gesture. So then Rupert goes, as the guy's walking away, Rupert goes, "What a cunt." And I was like, and I thought, and that was the first time I'd ever heard it used about a guy, honestly. So I that's like, comes out of my mouth 1,000 times a day. I was like, I love that.